Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSubscribed when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. Thrilled to have with me here today, Nick Hafen. Welcome to the Law Subscribe podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
So just in case my guests haven't come across you before, go ahead and give yourself a little introduction.
Sure. I'm the head of legal technology education at BYU Law School. I've been in that job for nearly a year now. And before that, I practiced law in Chicago at Kirkland Ellis for a few years. And then I opened up my own practice, which I still do on the side.
So let's talk about that BigLaw experience. Were you billing time?
Yes, definitely.
What was it like?
You know, I tell students there are a lot of big pros and big cons for BigLaw.
And the big pro is you get to charge a lot of money.
Yeah. You make a lot of money. They treat you well. You're a revenue producer for the firm. So,
and Kirkland has a great reputation. In fact, some of the clients that I will do some work for on a subscription basis, when they have a big transaction or something that they want the cachet of having a big fancy law firm on the letterhead, they still go to Kirkland Ellis. There's something to that cachet, right?
Yeah. Usually the executives don't get fired for hiring Kirkland. So.
No. I mean, your legal budget will go over budget that year, but yeah, you're gonna. I mean, there's a reason there's a good brand around Kirkland Ellis for like in the grand scheme of things. Like when you think about your Sullivan and Cromwells, like they're not like some ancient big giant law firm. Like they're newer in the space, but they have a good brand. And I have to imagine then that maybe, although I could be wrong, that your interest in legal tech and technology in the legal space, which is what you're doing now, did that start at Kirkland and Ellis, or was that even something that started in law school or before?
Yeah, I would say law school, and maybe earlier. When I was doing my undergrad, I did a computer science class, just an introductory one, and I enjoyed it. I didn't keep pursuing that, but it kind of stuck in my mind. And when I was interning with a local solo practitioner before law school, he had me filling in the blanks on a will. And I knew enough about code to know that computers could do this better than me, right? Instead of me just doing plug and play. And so in law school, I was fortunate that I went to BYU Law School, and the dean was really forward thinking and was, starting a bunch of different tech and legal design related initiatives, including our Law X program. And so I got to participate in that. I think it's called the Legal Design Clinic. And so we would each semester, they pick a problem and try and solve it or make some progress in solving it. And that first semester that we did it, we picked debt collection. So there's a very high default rate in debt collection cases. And we decided to try and make a difference in that, make some kind of dent in it. And so we designed basically an app that would automate the answer. Somebody could upload their complaint and go through this questionnaire, and it would automate the answer. So that's kind of where it started. I kind of stayed involved in the legal tech scene, tried to. At Kirkland, I was trying to do some tech related stuff. It's a little bit tough, just because you're busy doing other things, and it's always hard to do something new. And then one of the reasons I started my own practice was to do more tech related stuff, to try things out.
Yeah, I mean, since depending on when someone's listening to this, what Nick was talking about with like programming like a chatbot and like if this then that style logic, like you had to do a lot of manual work. Gen AI was not a thing yet. Can you imagine having like being able to plug into like a Gen AI or an LLM, back then? Like your work would have been done.
Nice.
Right?
Yep.
It would have been like actually like usable, like probably like right then and there.
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing that you were working on that, but like, it does beg the question then, like looking at these tools, like some of these Gen AI chatbots, not just like the chatbots that have been out there, but things like what Tom Martin is doing with Law Droid, like is that like, have you looked back into that, like what you did in law school now with the tech where it is today, and you having your own practice? Like, have you been thinking about how could I do what I did back then before my practice?
Yeah, yeah. So I've looked a lot into the legal AI tools for my day job, right? And use a lot of them, tried them out, and then I have tried some of my to do some practice related tasks with those, just testing it out and seeing how it works. And it's been really interesting. They're very effective at some things, and they can save you a lot of time. With a part-time practice, it's harder to justify the cost for some of them. But like if, with just a few clients, but if I was scaling up at all, right, this would save me hours and would be well worth the cost, right?
Right, absolutely. And and so, although I have to imagine, sort of like with me with this podcast, right? Like I have a subscription practice. The podcast started before my practice, and like
Hmm.
I'm still like, and I've gotten to a point where like I am like helping out my guests, but my guests still help me out. Like I'm still learning things. Like I'm just a guy. I'm just a solopreneur, and so like even though I've got the podcast, it's still like helping my practice, and
Yeah.
so I got to imagine like having to teach legal tech. It's still like you're able to like leverage things you're learning. It's like the two birds one stone thing, or like
Yep.
multiple outcomes one action, where you're learning all these tools to teach these tools, and in the teaching process you're probably learning things back that the students are using them in ways you maybe never would have thought of, and now you can adapt that to your
Yeah.
practice. Am I onto something there?
Yeah, for sure. It all works together really well. I'm using these tools to prepare for my teaching. I found it to be pretty, like I use ChatGPT to help me understand a topic because I can ask really detailed questions, the dumb questions that you might be afraid to ask an expert or to waste an expert's time. So it's been really useful for that. I'm teaching an AI class at the law school, and I had the students do an assignment comparing different models at various tasks. And so it was really interesting to see what they came up with. And that helps me with my practice as well. It all works together pretty well.
And I have to imagine, because I know BYU is not alone in letting some like full-time faculty have some side practices, because I think over the years we've seen the value in like adjunct faculty being
Hmm.
practitioners and what they can teach and bring to the students. And so that you're able to, be the head of legal tech education at BYU and also practice. I think it goes the reverse, right? Like things that's happening in your practice, so that you're using these tools in the real world. Now
Yeah.
you are able to give real world examples to your students, and it's not just all esoteric academic
Yep.
stuff, right?
Yeah. I think they really appreciate the practice experience because you're right. A lot of uh, law school faculty don't have that, or just a little bit of it, or it's been a long time. So I think they appreciate that. It helps me stay up to date with what's going on, listening to podcasts like this, talking to other practitioners, trying things out to see if they actually work in practice. Yeah, it's great.
So then let's get a little bit more into the practice, right? So you're at Kirkland, you're trying to adopt technology, you have your minimum billable hour requirements, and you want to get your bonus and all that. And so even if they're open to adopting legal tech, you're just like, it's hard to build a practice in a practice when you're a young associate and you just got to bill your time. So so you decided at some point, you were gonna go teach, and you have this opportunity to open up your own practice. Now you're able to use all this as tech. But why subscription?
Yeah. So when I started my practice, I did it through the Chicago Bar Foundation's Justice Entrepreneurs Project,
Oh yeah.
and it's a great program.
Friends of the show. I'm about to
Definitely.
have, at the time of recording, Jess Bednars and I, who used to run the program, used to be very involved with the program. She's now with Above the Line Network, and we're going to be talking about that. But at the Chicago Bar Association, I'm a co-chair of a solo small firm committee, and now
Great.
twice in this last bar year, we've had folks from the Justice Entrepreneurs Project on there, and so it's a fantastic program, and that's very cool. So I didn't realize that when I was having you on the show, Nick, because I've had several guests now who have gone through that program, and
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, like that they are pumping out innovators left and right. So really cool to hear you went through it. So then, sorry to interrupt you, but I'll let you
No, no
continue this
worries.
story. So JEP alum on the show.
Yeah, so they talk a lot in the training they provide and in the discussions you're having with others about value-based pricing and billing. And in the program, you're not actually allowed to bill by the hour to remain in the program, which was not a concern for me at all. I already, didn't want to do that. And it wasn't just because of my experience at Kirkland, it's because it just doesn't make sense to me, right? If you want to maximize what you're earning, if you want to have better quality of life, you can't just be trading your time for money. And so I always wanted to do flat fee and subscription based billing. I have done some flat fee work as well, but yeah, it just aligns the incentives way better. You can, it drives you to be more efficient, right? To use these tech tools so that you can have your time back and still make money. It's better for clients too, right? It aligns the incentives. They're not scared to call you. They don't wait till it's too late to call you because they're getting, billed for every 6 minutes on the phone.
Right. And it's one of these things where it is genuinely better for the lawyers and it's genuinely better for the clients. And lawyers that have been billing time for like decades, it's hard for them to even understand and appreciate that. And I've seen both angles, right? I've seen lawyers who've been billing time forever. They're like, well, it's not good for the client. How could it possibly be good for the client? Because there's no accountability. Like, how do they know what you're working on? It's like, well, do they need to know what you're working on if you're just getting them quality work quickly and turned around fast? And then I've had lawyers who've been practicing forever on the other side, and they're like, it can't possibly be good for me and be good for the client. If it's good for the client, it must be bad for me. Right? Like they're just like the opposite.
Yeah.
And so you have attorneys on both sides of that spectrum. Well, if it's good for the client, it must be bad for me, or it's not good for the client at all, because then they this whole other thing. So yeah, it's not true. If this is your first episode on Law Subscribe that you're tuning into, it's not true. As Nick said, value-based pricing and billing, which subscription is a part of that, aligns incentives, drives efficiencies. And especially, I got to imagine when it's a part-time practice, you're already capped at the amount of time you can work in your business. So if you're only billing your time, you're even further capped on how much money you could earn if that's the only way that you're making money. So, and a lot of time listeners know I do both subscription and flat fee work, but I take the Costco approach, which is in order to do business with me, you must first become a subscriber. So when you're doing that flat fee work, Nick, are you just doing one-off flat fee work, or are you also making people subscribe even at a de minimis amount?
I haven't had a ton of opportunities for this, but I have not required people to subscribe in order to do the flat fee work. I've done some like one-off jobs, and that's worked out fine for me so far.
And is it all in like the small business transactional space, even the flat fee work?
Yeah.
Because I have to imagine, because I do the small business fractional counsel too. I do that thing too. And so even if you're doing like just a lease negotiation for them, like a commercial lease or something, they're a small business. They're gonna have ongoing legal needs. I try to tell them, like, one of the reasons I could give you this great flat pricing is by you being a subscriber. And then you can appreciate the value of having an attorney that you could contact and not have to worry about, is this costing me money? Because you've already paid.
Yep.
You've already paid the money at the start of the month. And I don't know, we'll talk about what jurisdictions you're in. You're at BYU, so we can sort of guess, but like with the legal ethics there allow, because every jurisdiction is a little bit different with the legal ethics and the billing and stuff. Here in Illinois, flat fee, fixed fee bills could go right into your operating account. Subscription pricing, as long as they're reasonable, and the way I've set up my practice is it's a recurring fixed fee. And so I'm able to, those would go right into the operating account. But I'm curious to know then, like, how you're able to handle that kind of a thing from a rules of professional conduct perspective with how you're pricing and such.
Yeah. So when I started, I was just admitted in Illinois. And so if I remember, the rule is like, you can have a fully earned subscription, like at the beginning of a service month, as long as you like keep availability, right? Even if they don't necessarily use you that month, you've kept availability in case they do. And I was recently admitted in Utah. And so, I've got to make sure everything's kosher there. Actually, I do have a partner when I was switching to my BYU, I was in solo practice for about a year before I took the BYU job. And when I took the BYU job, I teamed up with one of my former classmates, actually. So we're all kind of both operating as solos, just sharing back office type expenses. We each have our own clients. So he was operating in Utah before I joined him. So he's already checked into that. But yeah, it's really nice when the rules allow for that, right? And so far they have, it's what I've encountered so far.
Yeah, yeah, good. And Utah is, of course, like one of these sandboxes right now with re-regulation. Are you looking into anything like that since you're already leveraging an alternative fee?
Yeah, I actually at the end of last year got put on the committee for the regulatory sandbox. So I'm the secretary. I don't have voting power, but it's been really interesting to see behind the scenes what how they're evaluating companies. They recently imposed an innovation requirement. So, looking for applicants who are trying something more different, right? Not just like to capitalize the firm differently. And so I haven't personally looked into, using it yet, especially if I were looking to expand, beyond my current clients or current offerings. That's definitely something I would look at. I feel very fortunate that we've got that option here.
Yeah, yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I know attorneys who are like starting like legal tech companies in Arizona, for example,
Yeah,
that
for
are
their
like,
ABS. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they're partnering with not even necessarily just non-licensed legal professionals, but just like tech people and other people.
hmm
So, so the difference between like alternative business structures and what's allowed in Utah, like what could you do in Utah that's like kind of like that?
So in Utah, you can basically ask for exceptions to the rules. So it doesn't like Arizona is just limited to the alternative business structures, right? But like in Utah, you can ask to have non-lawyers provide certain legal services or legal advice, right? And the way that the committee looks at that, they look at the level of risk to determine what's acceptable and what's not. But for example, one of the legal aid organizations around here, Timpanogos Legal Center, they've participated in the sandbox and they've gotten permission for non-lawyer like social workers to give limited legal advice. And they recently got permission for those social workers to sit at counsel table. Even if they're not speaking to the judge unless asked, they're able to be more involved in the process and really improve the experience for Timpanogos Legal Aid's clients. So it's been great to see, both for-profit companies looking at ways to improve access to justice, and then from the other end, legal aid organizations doing the same.
Right. It's like one of these things where when I hear that, I'm not worried about that. Like even if I were like a
Yeah.
traditional attorney, because this is the latent legal market. Like lawyers aren't even serving this market. So like they're worried about competition or whatever. But like these people are never going to hire a lawyer, probably.
Yeah.
Right. Certainly not a
Yeah.
billable hour attorney.
Yes. But the only way they might ever hire a lawyer, right, is if we're able to provide a lower cost service because we're billing differently, because we're not trading time for money. And so, we can work at the problem from both ends, right? Like pulling down the cost of legal services and improving the quality of free legal services.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking to somebody recently, and when I was explaining my business model, how I'm serving the latent legal market, they pointed out to me it was kind of like Uber when Uber came to the scene. And I didn't sort of realize that, but it's like think about this latent market. Because when I was thinking latent legal market, I was always kind of putting it in the access to justice camp when it's not
hmm
necessarily like that, right? Because like think about all the people who would have taken a cab anywhere, everywhere, but there were no cabs to take
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
only had cabs in big metropolitan areas, in cities. But now with Uber, it's like literally everywhere, and it just exponentially increased the amount of people using like a cab-like experience through Uber.
Yep.
I think there's a similar latent legal market in the legal or in society, and lawyers are just not equipped to serve them, especially when you're capped at how much you could earn and how many hours there are in a day to bill. And it's like synchronous one-to-one work that's not automated and productized. So there's huge opportunity for lawyers to make a heck of a lot more while we still have this monopoly until
Yes.
Utah and Arizona become the rest of the country, which might happen.
Yeah, that would be great. But you're totally right. And a lot of people think you have to limit your income if you're working for people without as much money. But that's just not true, right? If you're doing these alternative fee structures, you can still make a lot of money. You don't you don't have to decide I'm going to live in poverty to serve the underserved middle class. You can make money. You can make very good money. You can make more money than a lot of lawyers billing time.
And help a heck of a lot more people while you're doing it.
Exactly. Yep.
And it's just going to look different. Like it's not going to be like, the sexy stuff you're doing at Kirkland and Ellis working these, $100 million M&A transactions,
Those can be fun, but yeah,
yeah,
there's,
yeah. Or complicated Chapter 11, there's 100 parties involved kind of, things, right? So like
Oh,
you're not going to like, it's not like that, like sort of fun when you think of practicing law in law school, like, oh, there's all these parties and I'm negotiating and I'm doing this. So you're not going to be doing that. It's going to be like low level stuff, but still things that we are trained in, that we understand better than the average person or average business owner.
mhm.
And it genuinely helps them. Like their life is improved, their business is better and more profitable. They didn't have to worry about this legal issue, and you could scale that and represent more people doing the not sexy legal problem solving, but you're doing less sexy problem avoidance, and that
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
can't charge as much for that.
Yeah, I'm interested in what you think of this. So for me, part of the fun, the sexiness, if you will, of the subscription model or the part-time practice working for, small businesses is I find it really interesting to try and build the system that works, right? That's efficient, but still providing a really valuable service, finding ways to add value so that they keep subscribing. That's not the practicing law part, but I really enjoy that part. I'm curious if you think if that's true for you, and if you think, do the people who do subscription practices and alternative fee structure practices, is that generally true of them, or does it work equally as well for people who just enjoy the practice part?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have definitely grown the opinion that attorneys who are leveraging alternative business models for their practices tend to lean more entrepreneur, or like I like
Hmm.
doing the business stuff. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, it's still the lawyer brain, right? You're just problem solving, not just legal problems. You're problem solving business problems and other
Yeah.
problems, right? And so I think that in a constrained world where even the lawyer who just likes practicing law and doesn't like the business stuff, if they can no longer bill their time because it's now been deemed unethical, like a thought experiment I like to give people is pretend next week is the last, like the bar or the licensing body has decided that you have 1 week and then the billable hours banned. What are you going to do in that week? How will you redesign
Yeah.
your business? And when you apply the legal mind to that, I still think like they will have a heck of a lot of fun, even if they just like practicing law, because you're using
Yeah.
all those same problem solving skills. So leaning towards in the status quo world, it takes an entrepreneur to do this kind of a thing.
Hmm.
But I still think that if you could shake up that status quo, any lawyer who even just like, I just want to practice law, I don't want to run a business, I still think
Yeah.
they're going to appreciate all the efficiencies when they start thinking about, oh, like I could leverage these tools to automate and be profitable. And like, eventually the tracking time thing has diminishing returns, because like at
Hmm.
first it's like, okay, well, I'm spending a lot of time on that. It becomes, how do I spend less time on that and make the same amount of money instead of the
Yeah.
reverse?
Yeah.
And then eventually you're saving so much time on certain things that used to be billable tasks that you're just like, I'm not going to even track my time on those things anymore. And it's a total paradigm shift. And once even the I just want to practice law lawyer hits that, it just opens up all the different ways that they can start delivering legal services. Even if they're not thinking
Hmm.
about the business of law, they're just thinking about the delivery of legal services. And I still think that like scratches an itch in the lawyer's brain. That's super
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the subscription model definitely allows you to spend less time on administrative stuff and more time practicing.
Yeah, yeah, and you're automating, like even all the things that we talk about on the show can help automate non-billable tasks for a billable hour firm. Like
Yeah.
so much of it. But then like when you're already in the process of automating everything else, like it's also going to get rid of billable time. Like that's
Yeah.
why like some of these, these legal tech companies at ABA Tech Show, they're like, we help automate this, we automate that, and we automate that, which is all non-billable time. But if like you really like see what they're doing, they're also getting rid of billable time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why it makes it such a hard sell. I've never talked to a legal tech founder that said, I like selling to billable hour firms.
Yeah. There's just not an incentive to be efficient in the same way.
No, but there's a little bit of push and shove with it, right? Because like if I'm doing what we're talking about, if they're trying to sell to me and you that we're charging lower prices because we're serving a wider market, even if we could bring in more firm revenue on a client to client subscriber basis, it does not necessarily make sense for me to be spending a stupid amount of money on legal tech because we're
Hmm.
not charging premium prices. And these legal tech companies will have a hard time still even selling to subscription based attorneys who are not charging premium prices, who are targeting these latent legal markets because their pricing model just doesn't work. And, I don't know about you, but and I don't know if you're doing this because you are such a small practice, but I get reached out to by like marketing companies all the time, or like these platforms. Like, I'm not going to mention any of them right now, but like, they're like, oh, it only costs you 3 billable hours a month to like go with our marketing platform. We're going to send you tons of billable work. It's like, well, your model doesn't comport with my model. I'm charging $20 a month and $50 a page at like my starting pricing. I'm not going to pay you $1,000 a month or more. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to get enough clients. When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional-only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high-quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show.
Yep. It's like you look at a lot of legal tech company websites and it's impossible to find pricing information. And I think they're running into that problem too, right? That they need different pricing for their different customers because of those different models. And they don't, there are solo practices and small firm practices that do make a lot of money, like a boutique that's still serving, high-end clients. And so they don't want to charge a lower price for all solos because they don't want to miss out on that revenue. But if they don't if they don't have a low enough priced option, they miss, all the people like you and me that it doesn't work for.
Right, which is why I'm proud to say, and at this point in the conversation, the mid interview ad roll has already gone. But my sponsors of the show, 650 and Gavel, they have their pricing on their websites. Yep. Right, so they're not trying to hide the ball. A lot of synergy with what they're trying to accomplish and what I'm trying to accomplish, which is why I agreed to have them sponsor the show. I'm not just going to let any tech company sponsor Law Subscribed. So let's talk about your experience with the subscription model so far. So tell us a little bit more like how long you've been utilizing it and like what it's been like for you and your clients.
Yeah. So I was doing just flat fee for the first probably almost year that I was doing my firm. But then when I joined up with my partner, he was already doing the subscription, which is something that it was on my to-do list, right? So it wasn't new for me in that sense. So I've been doing that probably for about a year now, doing the subscription practice. And I love it. I'm trying to remember what your other question was.
Well, just about it. Well, your clients think about it too. What's
the
been their
clients think
experience?
about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that they really value is the predictability, right? That's really valuable for small businesses. They would rather pay the same amount every month than, nothing for a few months and then a really big bill. It's just much easier to plan that certainty. And so they like that. They like that they don't have to worry that it costs extra for them to call and say, hey, I've got this problem. It just works better for them, in general.
And I know you're small, but have your clients been like institutional ones who have they've previously hired billable hour attorneys, or have you seen more of the people who are the clients who are signing up with you are more, hey, this is the first time I've even able to hire an attorney, and maybe they're like, well, yeah, of course it's subscription. Everything else my business is paying for is subscription.
Yeah, I think it does make sense for a lot of them, like that. They're used to this model. They have Netflix, or they pay, a subscription for bookkeeping or something. For a lot of them, it is the first time that they've hired a lawyer. Not all of them. And, sometimes there's like specialized work that I tell them, you'll need to hire somebody else for that. And I do try and find them, attorneys to refer to that are doing flat fee or subscription billing. But yeah, like one of my clients is in a business program at one of the universities here, and was just telling me about his classmates and how much money some of them have spent, 5 figures just for setting up a business and incorporation using traditional law firms that are doing billable hours. And it's just astonishing to me. And I think it's often because they don't know, right? Or somebody's told them, oh yeah, just go to this law firm. They'll do it. And they don't know. That's one of the problems with the legal industry is it's very opaque. We also are bad at putting pricing out there as an industry. This client of mine said his professors were very interested by our business model when he told them, because they did some exercise where it was like a due diligence exercise. And so the professors were like looking at everybody's, legal documentation, and they were impressed by our client because it was very organized and up to date and everything. And, they were very interested, right? Because all their other students are having a much different experience.
Yeah. And that's happened to me too once, where like I was hired by like an MBA student or something, and, to like do some legal work for them. And then their whole business, like one of their classes, like started talking about subscription model as a business thing in light of that one student's interaction with me. Yeah. And so it could definitely happen. Actually, they're not a client anymore. I should follow up with that client and check in, the former client and check in. So you talked about the pricing thing, about listing pricing on websites and stuff. So, you have a small practice. You don't have necessarily like a name of your practice like listed on LinkedIn or anything. So is that something that you're actively marketing, or it's just like a word of mouth type thing, and you'll help people as they discover you?
Yeah, for now it's word of mouth. I've been working on just like a small website landing page with some information, and maybe that'll be up by the time this airs.
Yeah,
but for now,
I would think so, because it's going to be like way out. Yeah, in 2024.
Good.
Yeah.
So far, just word of mouth. Like I'm not looking for new clients right now, and so it doesn't matter as much to have that presence. But I would like to have it out there, and we have had a website up in the past that did have pricing information out there for the different subscription tiers. So yeah, I'm definitely, I am supportive of people putting their pricing out there.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I was trying to think about before was when you mentioned if you can't help them, you want to be able to find them a reasonably priced attorney. And I have to imagine like you could reach out to the JEP alumni base and try to find somebody through there. Now, I know they're all probably, not all of them, but a lot of them are probably Illinois licensed attorneys, right?
Yeah. I have referred a client to, I gave him a few names from the JEP program. It was intellectual property, so it was federal law. But yeah, these are people who I know do value-based billing. So I was happy to do it.
Yeah, it's one of the, because I sort of missed the ball on that. I sort of discovered them at the wrong time. I was already very into my building my practice, and I really probably needed more of an accelerator than an incubator, and they're more of an incubator. And so I missed that. And like one of the things when I talk to lawyers who are interested in starting their own practice, I'm like, well, if you do an incubator program, like you get access to that alumni network, which is pretty incredible. And Amanda Carey, who has a criminal and family law subscription-based practice that's like a nonprofit law firm, she even got her start practicing from working for another JEP alum who then sold her practice to her, which then she reconfigured into the nonprofit and all that. But like even that was like an onboarding for her, and then she wouldn't have gotten if she wasn't part of that program. So like the network itself, let alone learning how to start a law firm from scratch and using value-based billing, that's valuable. But so is the network is extremely valuable. Something that I'm doing based upon a guest I've had on the show is I'm going to have, like, now that I've got the whole website powered through Substack for Law Subscribed, I'm going to have like a blog post type thing that I'm going to update over time, where it's going to link to all of the guests I've had on the show, what their practice area is and their jurisdiction, and just like keep like a running, living sort of Substack post with that, which I thought was a great idea that a past guest gave me. Because that's what they said. Because they've listened to this past guest, listened to every episode of my podcast, and I was like, "What's missing?" Like, I genuinely want to know what's missing. And when I moved from Substack to from my old website, I used to have like little asterisks next to all the guests who were lawyers using the subscription model, and then that disappeared with the new thing. So I think I need to have like a dedicated living post. Which, Nick, you're going to go on there for Utah business transaction or business fractional counsel type attorney. So that will be a resource for you to go to, and for every other attorney to go to that, like, I'm looking for an affordably priced attorney. Oh, well, let's look at who's been a guest on the Law Subscribed podcast in what
Yeah.
jurisdiction and practice area, right?
Yeah, I definitely would have used that, when looking for somebody to refer for this IP work.
And it'll help incentivize people wanting to use the subscription model and be guests on my show,
There
because
you
I'm going to
go.
run out of guests eventually.
Yeah.
But for real, like, I gotta have, like, I know there's, like, you could use these as marketing or whatever, for a practice, but also, like, it'd be nice to give, you guys are giving me content. It'd be nice to give you something back in return too. Here's a list of all the past guests who are attorneys that maybe, people can hire or refer cases to.
Yeah. Everybody benefits.
Yeah, there you go. So getting back into how, like, what you're doing with the model, you're the tech guy, for BYU. You're a legal tech educator. So what technology are you using, Nick? Tell us.
Yeah, we use the Google Suite right now, and that works pretty well. Again, especially with kind of younger clients that I'm working with, they're pretty used to that. They're used to sharing and collaborating that way, and it works well for them. And I'm not doing things that need a lot of the advanced stuff that you would get in Microsoft Word. I think I may have used it on occasion, but generally stick with Google Suite. And then we use Clio, and that works well enough. I think it could be designed better for a subscription practice. So if they're listening, that's my feedback. But it works.
What they would tell you is, well, that's why they integrate with Fido. If you wanted to do subscriptions,
okay.
you could.
I didn't know that, and I heard about Fido last year at Tech Show, but I haven't seen anything about them lately, so I'll have to check in on that again.
Yeah, and I don't quite know how that integration works, because I know you could just sign up for Fido, so whatever you're paying Clio.
Yeah.
I just want to. Maybe this is why they don't promote it too much.
They don't want to get cannibalized.
Well, it's one of these things where if you have high switching costs and you're already in Clio, well, now you can sign up for Fido and just integrate it right into Clio. But for someone like you who has a small practice and the switching costs are low, you could maybe unsubscribe from Clio and subscribe to Fido and, like, just use Fido if that works for you. Hey, look, I just came with a great marketing slogan for them.
Yeah. I've thought about trying to replace it with something like Airtable too. If I just kind of create my own system, but with a part-time practice and a full-time job, it's hard to set aside the time for that.
Yeah. I mean, that's why platforms like Clio and Fido are out there, right? It's like you don't want to set it up yourself. Somebody tech savvy like you and like me, we might be able to go and do that in Airtable. And believe me, I thought about the Airtable thing too. But it's, or even like Notion. Like you could, like, do a lot of Notion these days.
I use Notion a ton.
It's got Gen AI built into it now, and so like I've even been, like, debating, just doing something like in Notion. So it is one of these things where I'm trying to. My client portal software is integrated with Stripe, but I've been thinking about moving even my subscriptions over to Confido Legal, which used to be Gravity Legal, and then just keeping the payments totally separate from the practice management and all the other stuff. And then I could switch practice management and other stuff whenever I want. And then the payments, I don't have to worry about churn because it's on a separate system. But so that brings me to, Nick, what you're using for payments. Is it Clio or
Clio
Pay?
Yeah. And it hasn't been great, right? It hasn't been a great, like, client experience, because the way we do it is you set up like a payment plan, and it just doesn't work as well, especially if you have to add in any flat fee work, because the way they apply the payments always throws off the payment plan. And it works okay, but I have had clients comment on the experience not in a positive way.
Yeah. So, Clio, if you're listening, or every other practice management software out there that's not built for subscription-based law practices or even flat fee law practices for that matter, you're on notice. And Fido is really the only company I know of that they're built exclusively for that. I mean, there used to be some other ones, but they've pivoted. Talk about a latent market, right? It's hard for Clio to pivot into building out that thing that they're not sure lawyers are going to use. I really do think this is, if you build it, they will come type situation. It's just about timing. And, like, when will they come? Any other tech that you want to share with the audience?
I'm trying to remember. I play around with a lot of stuff. I've used Gavel and played with that, and I really like their platform. We use it, in my day job at the law school. They give free access to law schools, and the Law X classes that I'm working with now, they use that for a lot of their app building and document automation. And 650, I'm a big fan of as well. I haven't personally used it much, but Kimball, the CEO, was the faculty, the adjunct faculty when I did Law X as a student. So big fan of them as well.
Yeah, you guys are in each other's backyard. They're not in Salt
Yeah,
Lake? Are they in Salt Lake, or like where are
I
they
think
in
they're in
Utah?
Salt Lake,
They are. Yeah,
or
yeah,
a Salt Lake suburb. Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Um, mhm. And then I just play around with a lot of like the AI stuff, the legal research AI, using ChatGPT for business tasks, speeding things up that way.
Have you
It's
used
been
Claude
so
3
much
yet?
fun.
Have you used Claude 3?
Not yet, not
Oh
yet.
man,
I've
I
been
mean,
meaning to.
it just at the time of recording, Claude 3 just came out, and yeah, it's like a much more powerful version of Claude. I mean, it's great, and it increased the context window by 50%, which is amazing. It was
Yeah,
already the largest free context window.
yeah. It's interesting to see how, like a lot of people default to ChatGPT. I often do. But then you start to find other things that are better for certain tasks, right? If you need a large context window, or this one lets you upload and that one doesn't. And it's been a lot of fun to see how companies are trying to find offerings that work for their customers.
And for the image stuff, which I've always had a really hard time with because I'm such like a I think in words. Like I mean, like
Uh-huh.
lawyer was the right job for me, right? Like I'm not very visual. I'm creative, but I'm not very visual. And so like Dolly and like Midjourney, like I got terrible results like from those things.
Yeah.
But Gemini, I was using their image creator before they like turned it
Before
off
I got,
because
yeah.
all the hoopla around that. And so I had incredible results. Like I was getting some incredible things. So like for me, the way my mind works and the way that image creation worked in Gemini worked really well for me, but the other tools didn't. So like sometimes it's like, how do you think as a human? Because really these
Mhm.
AI tools augment our own intelligence, right? And it depends on the task, right? Like as a podcaster with massive transcripts, Claude is always going to be better for me because it's got the biggest context window. And now you could like put like a small book if you're writing a
Yeah.
book into Claude, and it could like help you come up with new chapters, based upon your data that is copyrightable, right? Like that you
Yeah.
made. It's going to give you, and this is what I was explaining this to. I'm on like a local board for my library, like Friends of the Library. It's like the nonprofit for my community, and it's like a few of us are younger, but like most of them are much older. So I was like trying to like explain like, oh no, like the flyers that you made are great because when I put it into Canva and improve it, it's going to be better than if I just start from scratch using these Gen
Yeah.
AI tools.
Yeah.
So like it's still always better to have something that you're giving it than just like starting from scratch, unless you're literally just doing idea generation, right?
Yep. Yep. And the image generation stuff for me has been really instructive. I'm kind of similar to you. I'm really interested in creative stuff, but I had never had the technical skill to, actually produce anything
Right.
worthwhile. But when I've watched videos online, like Adobe puts out these videos of people using their Firefly generative AI and their generative AI features in Photoshop, I think that's a good model for how people are going to interact with these in the future to do work, right? They're not saying, give me XYZ and then just taking that, right? They have a larger vision of what they want, this piece of art to be, and they'll use the generative AI to generate assets. And then they'll move those, from Firefly into Photoshop and manipulate them there and change them and adjust them, edit them. And then they'll go back to the generative AI and, get the background or, get different things. And that to me says there's still value. A lot of people worry, is this going to put all the artists out of work? But the artists are the people best positioned to do that, right? They know about lighting and color, and they can really take advantage. Like I can take advantage of image generation, but they can really go. And I think lawyers are going to be the same way, right? Already are the same way. If you have that legal experience, you can really run with AI. And I've talked to people without legal experience who have gone and used ChatGPT for legal help, and it was pretty good. It was better than they could have gotten, and especially if they can't afford a lawyer. But lawyers can really take it and run, because they know the stuff.
Right. Absolutely. I don't think we as a profession are going anywhere, right? Like we are the subject matter experts. We know the right input to have quality output, and we can judge whether or not the output is quality or not. I
Yep.
mean, and like even with things like art that is very subjective, right? Like there's still someone who has an artistic eye or has worked with art enough to know that like this image generated is better or not better, or they could more quickly see that, oh yeah, the hand is messed up or something like
Yeah.
that, right? I'm going to share my screen right now because this is my episodic reminder for all my listeners that if you want to see the video, I'm now sharing the video. If you subscribe to at www.lawsubscribe.com, you'll get email updates with that when every podcast episode goes live, and you'll get access to the videos too, which is just for free subscribers. This is the power of Substack. So I'm sharing my screen now. This is a post that just recently went live. Again, at the time of recording, this was months ago from when you're listening to this. But I started a new project called the Law for Kids podcast. And using Gemini, I was able to, like, with the input, right? Because I'm thinking about input into this. I wanted to do a podcast about law for kids. So I needed a kid-friendly thing. And I wanted like a podcast microphone sort of like merged with the scales of justice. And I could never have drawn this ever. Right. And so, like, if you're seeing, if you're watching now, you see the logo for the Law for Kids podcast that I made using Gemini, doing iteration upon iteration upon iteration until I finally got what I want. I mean, I probably generated like 50 plus images and iterations until I got this. And at some strange point, it started to be like the face of an owl on these things. Like, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to one of the earlier images and see if one of those are better. And so I really liked this one. And it's not perfect, and the hands are also kind of weird if you really look very closely.
They often are.
But when you're looking for an anthropomorphic, kid-friendly microphone or podcast mic merged with the scales of justice, this is pretty good, I think.
Yeah. And who's to say how many fingers a microphone would have anyway?
Right. Seriously. So, like, I never would have been able to make that. Go back to your point. Like, I just don't have the chops to do that. And now if I wanted to, what I could totally do, because maybe I don't like the hands, or maybe, there's some things I want tweaked that the Gen AI wasn't able to do. Now I could go hire an artist and make a version, like a slightly improved version of that. Right. And even the colors of it was just like colors that it picked. I didn't change those colors, and I didn't really give it any color schemes to pick. I just wanted kid friendly, child friendly. And those were sort of the tones that it went with. And then I, in Canva, was able to pick out the rest of the background and choose the other font and stuff. And so, but still, like, if I wanted to change up the logo or do touches here or there, like, I'm not going to go to Gen AI because it's not going to be able to do that. I'm going to go to an artist. Yeah. But instead of having to hire an artist from scratch or a graphic designer, now I could just pay them to just improve the thing that is already mostly what I want, which saves me money. And also, I never would have hired that graphic designer in the first place, but now I might. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I think Gen AI just opens up everything. And the more people that use it, even for legal stuff, even though the models will have guardrails that say, this isn't a replacement for legal advice, they might eventually get to a point where it's like, okay, now I've hit a wall, and the model has said I need to hire a lawyer to, like, actually get the real advice I need. Now I'm going to go look for that lawyer. You and I are there as subscription, affordable attorneys that they can work with. You like directionally, you agree with, like, my analysis there?
Yeah, definitely. And for me, I often prefer to edit something to review an existing document and draft one from scratch. And if somebody comes to you and says, can you review this? Can you revise this? Can you edit this? That's more enjoyable for me than doing it from scratch. And that's not always true. Sometimes, somebody could bring you something that's bad enough that you need to start over. But often it's nice. You can just review what they did, and that works, well enough.
So you're in education, and you see how I got to imagine how there are more, at least the numbers show that there's like more women going to law school than men at this point. And yet, the data on the profession has shown that women and attorneys of color still not in leadership roles at big law firms like you were at, right? And it might not even be intentional, but I think the billable hour plays a big role in, like, women not going into leadership roles in big law. And that's not necessarily just because of the societal, pressures that have been put on women. And I've had mostly women guests on the show that have talked about this, but I'm curious to know, because I've now had a few educators on the podcast as well, that they've been able to talk about what they've seen in the classroom with the difference between, the way men and women will approach problem solving with technology, and that it's not just in practice, but you could see signs of that in law school. And I'm curious to know what your perspective has been on that, because as you know, you've listened to the podcast, it's mostly women and attorneys of color who are innovating in this space, not the white male lawyers like me and you. Yeah. So are you seeing like a little bit, like, I can't remember the word I was looking for, But are you seeing a little bit of that even in academia?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I've seen that. And since I've only been here for almost a year, I imagine it'll become clearer the longer I'm here. But I've definitely seen what you said, right? In the JEP program, that's definitely true.
Oh yeah.
And like, when I was going into BigLaw, I was I was frequently reading, like mom blogs, like moms who work in BigLaw, just because I was interested in the same things, right? Finding a little bit of work-life balance and things like that. I'm trying to think if I've seen in law school people, men and women, using technology differently. I don't know if I've seen anything yet that I would say is a big difference, but I'm interested to see if that turns out to be the case.
Yeah, I don't want to generalize. And of course, there's always exceptions to every rule, which we should know as lawyers. There's always exceptions.
Of course, yeah.
But it's just interesting. And for the women, I think, that are doing that, we should elevate them and highlight them. And then for the men who are not, we should help them see, like look how the women are doing it. Like, you should be thinking about doing it too. So it's not meant to like separate people into groups. It's meant to see who has strengths in what different areas. And let's look at that. But I think what you said about JEP is really interesting. I haven't asked any of the other people who've been through the program yet, but it's not surprising to hear that it's more women than men going through that program. So the last question I want to ask you then, Nick, is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
I knew this question was coming, and I feel like I still don't have a good answer. I'm going to say no, it's not. And the only defense I have is that I tried to come up with a definition that would work for a sandwich that wouldn't include a hot dog. And where I landed is just that, some definitions have exceptions. We know that as lawyers. So, define a sandwich as, bread with meat and or veggies in it. And then, subpart A does not include a hot dog, does not include a lobster roll. Who knows if it includes like my son's tortilla chip sandwich. There's a lot of variety, but that's where I landed.
A tortilla chip sandwich, very interesting.
Yeah,
right.
It's the driest sandwich you've ever seen.
Yeah, are those little peanut butter sandwich cracker things? Are those sandwiches? That's a good question.
I don't know. Is an ice cream sandwich a sandwich?
That's a good question.
These are the questions that keep people up at night.
Right. I mean, because even if it has sandwich in the name, it doesn't qualify under the definition of a sandwich. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's good. We'll accept that answer. Thank you very much, Nick. If people wanted to reach out or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can reach out at nick.hafen@law.byu.edu. And then by the time this is released, I will probably have nickhafen.com set up. I had a website up, and now I'm doing some changes. And so it should be back up soon. And that'll be, a better way if you want to interact with me for academic purposes, law firm purposes, other purposes. That'll be a more general purpose.
All right. Great. Nick Hafen, thanks again for coming on the show, Law Subscribed.
Thanks for having me.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.